Send in the red shirts.
Choose your pain. Wow. It was a very simple story, not much to it, but man, that was one of my favorite episodes so far. Okay, so I'm just going to start off from the beginning, and I'm sorry I'm talking real low, but I'm in a hotel. I'm on location doing a shoot, so I don't want to disturb anybody, but just put it like this. I don't know if he's good, bad, whatever, but Captain Lorca, the man, he is my dude. I don't agree with everything he's doing. I didn't agree with how he was treating the tardigrade, but this is the guy you want to have your back when you're in a battle scenario. At first I was wondering, how did the Klingons capture his ship so easily? I assume he was I couldn't really tell. I was a little distracted, but I think he was on a shuttle and the Klingons just appeared out of nowhere. And I'm like, how will they not detect it? And then I realized, oh yeah, they've got cloaking technology. Man, he made the episode for me. I love that kind of do or die, I'm not backing down, that never say die attitude. I love that. He had it in spades in this episode. He was like, when he's telling the guy, Tyler, on your feet, soldier. He was like Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2 talking to Kyle Reese. Man, that was dope. I loved it. Lorca, you did your thing this episode, man. Shout out to Jason Isaacs. Like I said, that character might be an asshole, but I'm loving him with every episode. The other thing that struck me, but then I had to check myself, was I was thinking, wow, these Klingons are really heartless and brutal. I know the Klingons used to be enemies of the Federation at one point, but geez, this seems over the top. And maybe some of the beatings were a little brutal. But then I remembered, hey, Star Trek 3, Search for Spock. Commander Krug wasn't the nicest guy. He actually killed Kirk's son, and he was willing to torture Saavik, Marcus, and young Spock to get the Genesis device. So all Klingons aren't the nicest of people, and they're in a battle, they're in a war right now with the Federation. So maybe it's just, maybe the fact that they showed how brutal the Klingons were, it just was a little off-putting, but it's totally in line. Well, maybe not totally, but it's in line with what we've seen from the Klingons pre-TNG before. I love the fact that we got some shout-outs to previous captains. We saw Robert April. We saw Matt Decker. He got a shout-out. We saw Joju. We didn't, that didn't really impact me as well because we only got to meet Joju for one episode, but props to her. And we saw Jonathan Archer. I didn't watch Enterprise. I'm going to watch it as soon as I finish watching DS9. And we saw Christopher Pike, whom we know is in this particular timeline because, like I mentioned in a previous video, he appears in the Discovery tie-in novel Desperate Hours. I liked Saru in this episode. I didn't expect him to do much as a captain because he's proven himself to be somewhat reticent, somewhat shy, not that much of a soldier, if you will. But he did a good job as captain. I was a little surprised to see how little sympathy he had for the tardigrade, given that he himself is of a species that is hunted and is prey for other species on his planet. Seems like he would have a little bit more understanding. But at the end, I guess he redeemed himself. But bottom line, I think he did a great job as a captain, even though his little warning spidey senses always go off. But he stepped up when he had to. In this episode that was so full of surprises and so unlike Trek, which I don't have a problem with at this point, we got to see Starfleet officers cursing, which, as much as I liked all of the previous iterations of Trek, TNG, Voyager, DS9, this show is just keeping it real. It makes sense that people would talk like that would use curse words like that. Here's the question I have, because there was a character on here that I've never had any affinity for, an original series character, Harcourt Fenton Mudd. I think he's a popular character. I love the original series, but I'm not as well informed about it as I am the later series. In other words, I've watched more of the later series episodes repeatedly more than I have original series. So while I do like the original series, I just can't speak to it with any high degree of memory or knowledge. But I do recall Mudd's character from The Trouble with Tribbles. I just found him annoying, not that interesting a character, just like a comic relief. I found his portrayal by Rainn Wilson in this episode to be far more interesting. It's not a character we're unfamiliar with, the cowardly guy who doesn't step up to the plate. We've seen it before, but I liked this version far more than the version that we saw in the original series. I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Do you feel like this is an improvement on the character? Do you feel like they ruined the character? Does it make you upset? It does not make me upset. Because like I said, I wasn't that big a fan of the character in the first place. But I liked what I saw here. I also had a little bit of a flashback to Star Trek II, when Saru is asking about conditions in engineering, or in the science lab, I should say. He gets the report that Stamets' life signs are low or non-existent. I can't remember exactly what was said, but that reminded me of the scene in Star Trek II when Kirk is told, you better get down here, better hurry. And I was like, okay, they killed another character. Wow. But Stamets pulled through, and I'm starting to warm up to him a lot more. Which brings me to the one kind of false note of this episode. Now, this is delicate territory, but I consider myself to be very progressive. That's not to say I understand or have a grasp of alternative lifestyles. Let's put it that way. I do believe everyone has the right to love whom they want, and they should not be judged by it. And because I believe that, that last scene, it was probably in my opinion, one of the most stilted and poorly, I'm not going to say poorly written, but poorly choreographed or poorly blocked, or just, it was very stiff. And I tell you why. Like I say, even though that is not my lifestyle, if you're going to show that on a show, and kudos, because this is the future. This is the 23rd century. Everyone deserves to be represented, because that is society. It's society now. One would hope it's society in the future. If you're going to show that, don't have the two characters just standing there with no emotion or no attraction to each other. We all know that if that were Riker and Troy in that scene brushing their teeth, they would have hugged each other. They would have kissed each other. They would have done more than touch each other on the head. So again, while I am not of the alternative lifestyle, and I'm not saying I even understand it, I believe that if you're going to show people as they are, let them behave and act like people, like the people that they are. So to not have those two, Stamets and I'm not too clear on the doctor's last name yet, Hurlber or something like that. Not to have them kiss or a hug or something like that rendered the scene flat and weird, because it just wasn't staged properly. They were standing so far apart, and they didn't seem like they were in love to me. So if you're going to commit to that, then do it all out. If we got to see Jadzia Dax kiss a woman who was one of Jadzia's previous symbiote's wives, if we see that, if Trek broke that ground, it's time to break all ground. And, if some of you out there are going to complain or say, oh, it's the SJWs, or it's a whole trying to minimize manliness or male whatever, I think you really should reevaluate your priorities or your thinking, because, hey, they're here, deal with it. So, next time, if you're going to show those two together, if you're going to let them be in a relationship, then they should behave like they're in a relationship, and that will prevent stilted, stiff, weird scenes like that. Oh, and speaking of that, I watched it twice, and it was hard to watch. I was watching it on my iPad, and it's hard to shuttle on that thing to go back without hitting a commercial block, because I'm paying for the commercials, which is weird. I'm paying, but I'm getting commercials anyway. The music gets ominous right at the end as the doctor walks out, and Stamets is standing there looking in the mirror, and I couldn't tell, did something happen to him? Maybe because he infused himself with the tardigrade's DNA, or whatever he did to make himself able to be the conduit for the spore drive. But the music is really ominous at the end, and I'm trying to figure out what happened there. Did something happen that I couldn't see? So if you picked it out or you saw something, please let me know. But all right, that does it for this review. I love the episode, Captain Lorca. Like I said, you were that dude. Keep it up. Just, maybe soften around your edges a little bit. But hey, I'll see you next week.